Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to the AI for Good Global Summit, all year, always online. My name is Xenia Fontaine from the International Telecommunication Union in Geneva, and I have the privilege of introducing today's webinar on AI driving digital divides and the future of African economies. The ITU is the United Nations Specialized Agency for Information and Communication Technologies, and we are also the organizer of the AI for Good Global Summit, alongside XPRIZE Foundation and in partnership with 36 UN sister agencies, ACM and Switzerland, our co-convener. The goal of the summit is to identify practical applications of AI to advance the Sustainable Development Goals and scale those solutions for global impact. And with our online weekly programming, we are trying to reach even more people across the globe. So please let us know where you are calling from which country or which city. You can use the chat function to communicate. Please make sure that you send your message to all panelists and attendees. If you wish to ask a question, please use the Q&A function. The moderator will select and read out the questions to the speakers. And we are particularly counting on your participation to create a very interactive session. And now I have the pleasure of introducing our moderator, Dr. John Kamara, the Director of Machine Intelligence Institute of Africa and the founder of AFIA Record. John, welcome. Hello.
Hello, how are you?
Good, thank you. How are you, John?
Very, very well. Glad to be here from Nairobi. It's evening time here, and we're happy to join the rest of the world. So welcome everyone to the ITU Africa Summit. We're excited to be here today, and we are gonna jump right in because we believe that AI, it is definitely the future for Africa as an emerging continent, and all the economies are emerging out of this economy. We have some amazing people on the panel today. I'm sure as you've seen in a number of the marketing materials that have gone out from the ITU and a number of our esteemed guests. But our first keynote speaker is a person of excellence, a woman who has made a lot of contribution to the development of digital technologies in South Africa. And allow me to welcome Minister Stella Tembesi Abrams from the Republic of South Africa, and she's the Minister for Communication and Digital Technologies. Minister.
Right, okay. Thank you so much, and good afternoon. Of course, I'm taking the South African time, and I just want to say greetings to everyone who's listening to us today, and thank you so much for joining us in this important topic that all nations are really trying their best to make sure that we do our best, not only as governments, but also as the citizens of the country. My name is Stella Abrams, as it has been introduced. I'm the Minister responsible for communication and digital technologies in South Africa. And of course, fellow participants, the topic, as we all know, which talks to the future of work in Africa with digital divide. Of course, we're looking at the AI opportunities and challenges to say what is it that we should do, or what is it that we're not doing right in order to leverage on the opportunities that are presented by the artificial intelligence. Of course, it is my pleasure to engage with yourselves this afternoon. And as we fashionably talk about building the digital economy, which requires a digital society, research has indicated that there's a lot that we need to do in order to achieve that. As we talk about research, that there's a need that we need to do, but the advantage once more is the fact that, especially in Africa, there isn't much investment that we have done for us to say we're comfortable with the status quo, or we're reconsidering because we've already invested a lot. We are now presented with an opportunity to invest for the future, to say how best can we leverage on the artificial intelligence technologies in order to help our countries grow their economies. As I say this, the basic thing, of course, as a person from government, is to make sure that we create an enabling environment And the basic thing, creating an enabling environment, starts with the policy. So there's a need for all of us as policymakers to make sure that we develop policies, AI policies, as the different countries in Africa, to say, how do we then plan to work on this artificial intelligence to resolve some of the challenges that we have, but also to enable an environment where we can build on that you are good at. As I'm speaking from South Africa, if I were to make an example, everybody that we come from the land of gold and diamond. And of course, we also have Mercedes-Benz, I can't leave that behind. But what people are not looking at, as we have seen currently that COVID, when it hit us, if I were to make an example, when it hit us, it showed us that all the personnel that we have, the unskilled labor, can one day lose a job. And that's a reality. As they lose their job, that translates to production levels. And if you're talking about production levels, it impacts on the economy. And therefore, as the people that are responsible for policies, how do we make sure that we do appreciate that there are technologies that can help us improve the production levels in order to turn around our economies? I made an example with mining, that as we have lots of unskilled people or labor in that sector, artificial intelligence has a key role to play. As much as most people talk about the threat that is imposed by the fourth industrial revolution technologies are the threat to jobs. One thing that we have not paid much attention on in terms of investment and providing clear directives is that of leveraging on the new jobs that can be built utilizing artificial intelligence. And of course, as I spoke about policy, there's been lots of news again, people talking about the ethics of the algorithms that are being used, because it is of no value to us as Africans if when we look for particular information, it doesn't talk to who we are, or it's not a true reflection of what we stand for, which is what we have seen in the previous regimes, whereby our story has to be told in a particular manner that suits the storyteller, and definitely we have not been telling the stories. Now we presented with an opportunity to say, just from programming level, how do we make sure that we get involved? How do we make sure that we have people and policies that must look into the ethics of the algorithms, so that as we leverage on the usage of artificial intelligence, our people do not get to experience what they experienced in the past, that have been discriminated against in the economy and in the knowledge economy that we're talking about. So that's just one component. And of course, key to the enablement that we're talking about is that we all agree that it matters. Data is the new oil. Others put it like that. I prefer data is the new oxygen, because for us to do everything, it really requires that data. How we use it has an impact, whether positively or negatively, to whatever that we want to do. Therefore, once more, as governments, we are then faced with the challenge of ensuring that, just like the EU has done and other regions, we come up with our own data policies that must also help create an enabling environment for innovators, for small businesses and other industries to utilize them for economic aspects. So this is not something that can just be done by government alone. This is why in South Africa, when President Ramaphosa took a decision to establish the Presidential Commission on the Fourth Industrial Revolution, he said, I really need a group of experts who will not be looking only at technologies, but who will be looking into the entire ecosystem of human beings, that people must eat, people must work, people must clothe. Then we have minerals, as I have said, and therefore we need everything that goes with it to make sure that these experts can then meet together and provide a blueprint document to say, where to South Africa. And as we do that in South Africa, to say we have channeled our energies, to say the commission has presented its report to the president. We are awaiting for its final adoption. But the most exciting thing again came when President Ramaphosa was appointed the chairperson of the AU. which gave us, again, another opportunity as South Africa to say, what is it that we can build on that we see that has worked not only in South Africa, but also in other states? How would we make sure that we bring all the African states together in the benefit of Africans, both in Africa and in the diaspora, utilizing the expertise that they have? As we did that, of course, the AU has its own working group on artificial intelligence. The Smart Africa grouping, again, has its own artificial intelligence working group, which is chaired by yours truly. And the president made a very big announcement that made us very happy to say, as part of his legacy project, he would really like to leave a legacy whereby he has established an Africa AI Forum, whereby we bring everybody in the forum, those that matter in terms of the expertise. When I say everybody, the expertise that are required from all the member states of the AU, and therefore to make sure that AU will have its own AI strategy that must help guide the different member states in ensuring that this time Africa does not miss out. I have a phrase that I like so much that I borrowed from Mao Zedong when he really decided to say it's high time that China takes leadership on technologies, the charge and surpass phrase. And I really believe that as Africa, we're given an opportunity to really do that. And if we are to charge and surpass, it means we've got to stop being consumers of the technologies that come from somewhere, but we also have to be inventors, which is why for us it becomes crucial to do just like other countries have done and other regions, to say we identify AI as a key technology that we think we can leverage on to change the economic status and social being of the people of the African continent. As we do that, of course, we are again cognizant of the fact that we have poor infrastructure in terms of the digital infrastructure, which is a crucial challenge that as government we are faced with. As we saw COVID-19 hitting us and people were forced to stay out of jobs, away from offices, reality sank, even for those that have believed that as governments, we really do not have to invest much in connectivity because people don't eat internet, as you would listen to some believing so. But it was proven that we can have the best bandwidth in the offices, we can have the best technologies in the offices or beautiful offices, but there may be situations or scenarios, as we have seen, that we're not able to come to work. And that presented a great opportunity for us in the digital space to say, now it is people that are calling upon us to say, we see this infrastructure that we have is not sufficient. We do want to make sure that we access digital services, but we cannot because of the poor infrastructure or non-availability of the infrastructure at all. Because as much as we're talking about poor infrastructure, there are still areas that do not have connectivity at all. And again, we are privileged as Africa, again, because we decided to build on what we have. To say, as we have the Broadband Commission, what strategies, therefore, we can employ to make sure that we partner with everyone and be able to say we're going to invest in connectivity. First, treating connectivity as a basic human right is one thing that we are saying we all agree that it needs to be done. If we do agree that people can't live without money, COVID has shown us that people can't live without internet. Where they have lived, we've really seen where there's been the divide and the disadvantages when even we had to provide education, which we all agree is a priority of any responsible government, and people could not access that. I'm talking about the policies that we make as government. I'm talking about strategies that we employ, but I'm talking about resources at the same time, because they go together. We may have great policies. If then money and resources are not following that, then it would mean that we're not really going to leverage on the technologies that we have. I spoke about the impact of COVID as we have experienced it in the past months. Again, very clear in the health sector, if I were to make an example with them, whereby we all agree that there's a shortage of doctors. We've seen it. Research again indicates that we need about 1.2 million doctors in Africa for us to be able to deal with the virus that we're looking at. And reality is that we do not have currently. And as the people in the digital technology space, ours is to say, how do we leverage on the deployment of artificial intelligence? Because people have cell phones with themselves, people have devices with themselves. How do we make sure that they can use that in order to change their social status and access the basic services that they must access without us going to get doctors where we're not going to find? We've gone to Cuba, we've gone to other countries that we're saying, come help us. But there is the artificial intelligence that we all agree that it can play a major role. As I'm talking about that again, it is very clear that as I spoke about the broadband infrastructure, there's also the issue of the energy capabilities. Because it's important to balance energy investment, because it's part of the infrastructure, because when energy is not stable, once more, it then impacts on the quality of the connectivity that we need, and therefore automatically it impacts negatively on the kind of service that we must provide. We talk about devices. People must access the services through devices. Once more, Africa has been a consumer of all the devices that we're talking about. And we really believe that we are presented with an opportunity that we can really come up with our own, that we are talking about bridging the gap in terms of the jobs that will be lost, but we can invest in the new opportunities that are there. And as I said, it is only Africa that has lots of people who are not connected. It is only Africa that has a high digital illiteracy rate. And therefore, investing in the skills, investing in the infrastructure, including the devices, becomes key. As I talk about infrastructure, earlier on I mentioned the fact that we all agree that data is the new oil, but data has to be stored, which means there's a need for us to invest in data centers and cloud storage. And as we do that, again, we all agree there's a need for us to leverage on the artificial intelligence to be able to do certain things in order to create the new economies that we're talking about. When I spoke about what we have in the continent, I mentioned the Broadband Commission. Of course, we also have the Program for Infrastructure Development in Africa, PIDA, which is also looking at bridging the infrastructure gap and identifying, of course, the financing models for sustainable broadband deployment. This is something governments cannot do alone, colleagues. This is something that requires all industries and government. All it has to do is to create an enabling environment whereby we have to agree at a particular point. That's why I said that policy making becomes very important, that identification of sectors that can really turn around the economy and resourcing those is very important. Because if we're going to say we're calling upon the private sector to come and invest in infrastructure in terms of connectivity, we've got to make sure that the environment enables that. Therefore, we've got to relax certain regulations. We've got to make sure that we look at tax incentives and others in order to make sure that indeed the environment for investment in Africa is conducive for investors to come and do it if we are to succeed in this journey we want to partake on. And of course, again, as we talk about the jobs that we are losing, Mackenzie mentions a very important thing, if I were to be specific on South Africa again, to say we stand to create about 4.5 million new jobs if we invest in technologies and connectivity. But as we talk about the new jobs that we're going to create, they also mentioned the fact about 3.3 million jobs are to be lost. This is what takes us to the need to say we've got to prioritize skills development. We've got to upskill our existing personnel. We've got to make sure that we change our curriculum, which in most cases has been designed for our people to just consume content and go and look for jobs. This is an economy that requires innovators and small businesses that must be given an opportunity to turn things around. People who must provide solutions instead of people who must just come and theorize what the framework says. If you look at the banks, they're also affected. And as I'm mentioning this, I keep on saying we see AI playing a critical role, because whether you're going to talk about automated banks, whether you're going to talk about the mines and everything, artificial intelligence plays a new role, and therefore it becomes a key technology that we believe that it can change the socio-economic status of our people and therefore of our countries. Again, we've had in South Africa the likes of Edcon, who recently announced that they stand to lose jobs. And of course, as people in the space were like, they really do not have to lose jobs if they don't have to be paying those huge sums in terms of property. Apologies to those that are in property business, but they can do and they can offer the services that they're offering and reskill and upskill the personnel that they have for call centers, for e-commerce platform, and then they still get salespeople, as we have seen in other countries. So we still believe that artificial intelligence can really turn things around. If we go back again to the impact of COVID that we've observed.
Minister, we're almost, if you could just help, I mean, we're enjoying your conversation. But before, I just wanted to ask you one question, and that, what is the South African government doing in the health space in terms of AI? And how is that helping the fight for COVID, similar to what we're doing here in Kenya with the likes of Afya Record and other companies that are solving problems in the private sector?
Thank you. Of course, in South Africa, one of the key things that we did when we were hit by the COVID was to establish the ICT work streams. We spoke to all sectors to identify themselves and get organized. And I must really commend the work that has been done by the ICT work streams, which has provided more solutions to the health department to say, we can deploy your artificial intelligence technologies in terms of how you help in terms of track and tracing of the people who have been tested positive, which is now has moved from the Department of Communications to the Department of Justice, but working with the Department of Science and Innovation. That's one of the things. And of course, in South Africa, we do have the Center for Artificial Intelligence Research, which does research work and has been working closely with the department to say, the Department of Health, this is how we can assist in terms of technologies. There's been lots of solutions and applications that have been provided, including blockchain technologies. I know the teams are right now working on a platform where you get access to free information on COVID, including the material that you need to access and pointing you to where you can go and test. And all that has been done by through the collaborative efforts of South African government and its own industries. And as I said, amongst those industries, it is the ICT work stream.
Thank you very much, Minister. That is absolutely fantastic. It's a pleasure to have you as a keynote opening speaker, and I think a lot of the audience has learned quite a lot about what is happening. It's a conversation I want to pick up with you later around the health infrastructure in South Africa. If you allow me, I will get in touch with you later so we can also share more information with the rest of the world. Next is our next, thank you very much, Minister. Our next presenter is Alex Sedov. Alex Alex is with Alliance for AI, and he has been involved in pushing education in AI in Africa for quite a while. And he's going to share with us some of his thoughts about how Africa can leapfrog using artificial intelligence in Alliance for Development of AI, and also in Alliance for collaborative work for startups and the ecosystem. Alex.
Yes, definitely. Thank you very much, John, for the introduction. And it's always an inspiration to listen to you, Minister, as always. I will go ahead and share my screen as I will be showing you all a presentation. So I will just try to work that here for a moment. Okay. Fantastic. So I believe you should be able to see my screen. Great. Well, I'll start off with a story for you guys, right? The year is 2018, and Nick Litombe, Nomso Kana, and myself were sitting around the table, basking in our perceived success. Nick from Cameroon was an applied physics PhD and data scientist, crafting energy and innovation policy for the United States government. Nomso from South Africa, she is a nuclear physicist turned fiber optics entrepreneur, deploying infrastructure in her country to reduce the cost of internet. I, based here in California, where I'm calling you from, was with NVIDIA and guiding the top 5 largest companies in the entire world to deploy AI solutions that billions of people will use. This all looked exciting for humanity until we had this chilling realization that there was an insurmountable gap that was growing in the quality of life that humans live. And this was because of the way people are applying the technologies that we're building. In that, in the near future, being wealthy won't be enough for you to escape this gap. The only way was that you'd have to increase the representation of people who look like you at the table where AI is built. As Minister just shared, you probably now see a version of this reality through COVID-19. It has come to expose this gap to more people. For example, as a rich person in Nigeria, you can't now simply send your kids to America for school when the schools at home are terrible. Similarly, you can't escape the poor healthcare systems in your country and fly to London when you are sick. And as a rich person, the security systems that are getting built will still spot you as a Black person and, oddly, as a criminal. Many of you wish for COVID-19 to end so all of this will go away. But I say to you that if the current application of AI continues because you don't do anything about it, this problem will last more than 3 decades until we are at the mercy of white and Chinese male engineers and researchers. We could not wait that day in 2018. We had to act fast. You cannot wait today. You have to act now. I'll paraphrase Nelson Mandela, since we have all the South Africans in the room. He said, I have discovered the secret that after climbing a great hill, one only finds that there are many more hills to climb. Make sure to pause and enjoy the view, then march on, because with freedom comes great responsibility. So to that, I share that last year at this powerful global summit, there were 2 men representing Africa handing out pamphlets. They are Nick Bradshaw and John Kamara, who's moderating. So after that, myself, Nick, Selena, Dr. Amare in America, we set out on a journey to convince our great friends at the ITU that it was crucial for African innovators to be at this table so the world has an opportunity to benefit from the groundbreaking work that's happening on our continent. Today, the ITU has agreed to have 3 sessions with up to 15 speakers of African descent. 60% of this particular one we help organize are women. So this is some great progress. It has been 500 years, but our voices edge ever closer, returning to the global innovation table. We will use it to speak, not just for Black people and women, but for Latin Americans, for Asians, for Europeans, and people in forgotten American states. We must stop our cycle of waiting for the world to change. We must stop waiting for our governments to magically do something on their own without our support. We must stop waiting for large global organizations to increase the representation in their staff because evidence shows that they don't have the motivation. We must stop waiting because for once, the same technology that threatens our relevance also provides us an opening to demonstrate a new path for its progression. AI for basic human needs. If I'm going to progress here, Onyeka Akuma did not wait when he went from discussing with my organization 3 years ago about finding mentors for his farm crowd startup in Nigeria, to now multiplying the yields of over 25,000 farmers in that country, earning him the current number 24 spot, right next to Aliko Dangote as the top disruptor list in Africa. Eric Rima did not wait when he set up Tambua Health in Kenya to dam the atrocious cost of MRI machines by designing an AI tool that on a phone, such that you could place that phone on the back of a patient. It collects sound waves from their lungs and uses those waves to create images that medical practitioners can use to diagnose disease. You can imagine how much cheaper that is than buying an MRI that costs the same as building 4 hospitals in Kenya. We must not wait. Now, let's talk about the other villain, the digital divide. You see, digital transformation is like a fast-moving train. From the platform, some people can stretch their legs and get on easy. Others have not been able to. They are divided from the digital world and all its opportunities. 30 million of those people are actually in the United States of America, by the way. So once again, it's a problem that we share together as a globe and should address together. In parts of Africa, we obviously have small percentages who have access and ability to pay comfortably for this internet. They are a very important group. But our challenge today is to come up with a plan that will beat that divide down this decade. My fellow panelists, I place your logos on the chat too. We will see how you think about that when we have our discussions. I spoke about this very topic at a Pan-African conference in Egypt last December and was told that Africa was too behind to talk about AI. My response was that if you look at Africa in short periods, you will find problems. But if you look at it decade to decade, you will find commendable growth that we can build on to design the future of our economies. You'll agree, there are Africans working at key positions for key organizations around the world. So our organization, Alliance for Africa's Intelligence, Alliance for AI for short, is laser focused on the future of our lives. Our approach is to tap into Africa's smartest minds around the world to get people acting on crucial matters that can't wait, experimenting and piloting programs until for-profit bodies, governments, or large organizations pick them up to scale them. The government sidekick. Our key principles are, as you see, #OneBrain, #Love, and #EachOneTeach2. The old plan was that leaders today have a focus on consumers. They think, how do we find $100 billion to borrow so we provide electricity and internet so people can consume? That is important, but this is solving the equation a little backwards. Hence, it hasn't worked properly for over 20 years. It doesn't start with small steps from the people that cascade into a domino effect, I like to call it. The AI revolution is not about consumers, it's about builders. AI is today. We must shift the tide from being consumers and seekers of aid towards being builders of solution. So, the Alliance for AI path to initiating your 4IR domino effect wherever you are in the world. We think you should identify your builders to activate them. You should meet the learners where they are. And there's an X factor, which you will tell me about at the end of this speech. Supercomputers. The builders need supercomputers and enabling policy. We must select these builders, those in our nations that we want to activate, even if it's just 5 companies. I mean, China started with Alibaba and Baidu. Your builders need these things to succeed. There's already progress as African innovators raised over $1 billion last year. Connectivity cost is going down over time if you look at it decade to decade, and mobile penetration is going up. But we are ready for the next wave. I hope Strive Maisiwa is listening, because the last wave, it was started by him, and it created millions of jobs, which was mobile. The next wave is indeed supercomputers. These, you can think of them as very powerful laptops to a room filled with powerful machines. The world didn't have modern AI that we're all talking about until 2012, when a GPU supercomputer started getting used to do AI. So how can Africa innovators build competitive AI without much easier access to supercomputers when their counterparts around the world have this easy? You see, it will take an African innovator 2 months to train a complex but important and useful AI model that will only take their counterparts a few hours in San Francisco with a small supercomputer, not even a big one. There's just one supercomputer in Africa today, and it's built and managed by my good friend Happy Sitole in South Africa. I was involved in the deployment of every single NVIDIA GPU supercomputer in the cloud today. So my evolving perspective is that when you are deploying your products and people are paying for it, yes, you can do that on the cloud. But when you are learning and experimenting to build, it's crazy to use the cloud, especially that you're paying for, when your competition in America have hundreds of thousands of free cloud credits, or even work with their governments to build supercomputers. So we need to solve this for our builders in Africa. You could start this with a small pilot, either less than $100,000 for one startup hub with C5 companies, or $500,000 for a city, or go $10 million to pilot this across 4 corners of the continent. I mean, we already spent $50 billion to build infrastructure, as Minister shared, or we can cut out a little slice just to test this whole concept of supercomputing. We already have a group of Africans deploying these very machines.
So Alex,
yes?
Alex,
Yes.
in the interest of time, we're gonna need you to sort of wrap up real quick.
Yes, no, I can go through this. If you give me 3 more minutes, I'll go through these. Pretty much the supercomputings for the builders are important. The education piece is incredibly important as well. We have to meet the learners where they are. You don't have to use the digital internet all the time. There's WhatsApp, there's radio, there's television. We at Alliance for AI are working. We've got Rose Gasicho over in Kenya. She's a little older than 20, but she's designing what we call a distributed crowd healing future of work learning plan, where she has a library of capabilities important to the future. Dr. Marapio will talk more about this, and my mentor Andrea Case in San Francisco as well. And we give this over to people to use that to learn in schools. It's already been piloted in Africa Leadership University in Rwanda, Africa Science Academy in Ghana, and in SUPCOM, Tunisia. So the final X factor is really you. You have to be the market and buy African solutions. Let's do away with the current outdated narrative where that major news outlets propel that says Africa are only seekers of aid and not buyers of solutions. I mean, with COVID-19, Africans have built a number of solutions that the world is not looking at. So the domino effect, as I close, is about creating thriving environments for the sharpest innovators, running campaigns that encourage local and international purchase of their offerings. Otherwise, there's no future of work if you're not buying African tools. Completely new industries will get enabled, which will transform your societies to the point where you have enough well-fed, free-thinking human beings who will make up a majority of your government, a responsible government to lead you to your future. So the very last slide here, at Alliance for AI, will continue to be one of the sidekicks of the government, ensuring we, the grassroots people, are making progress in Africa, in America, Brazil, and all the forgotten minorities of the world. You see, we cannot fail. We will only succeed if you join the movement. We have space for volunteers, including musicians and sports players. You should join. And those who want to fund our blueprint, so we scale these programs. The final quote here, before you continue, John.
Thank you, Alex.
Coming from, well, John, if you let me just close with this one, right? Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said, that is only when it is dark enough that you will see the stars. It's dark right now with COVID-19 lockdowns. And so if you're a star, I implore you to step out and be the star that the world will never forget. Thank you. Over to you, John.
Thank you very much, Alex. On that note, be the star, which is an important vision for the continent. And I think just to echo what Alex has said, there are a number of solutions that are coming out of Africa in the AI space. And if you look at COVID-19, COVID-19 presents an opportunity for our governments to actually look inward and see what solutions that our own entrepreneurs, our startups, our private sectors are building that actually help this particular pandemic and every other industry. And it also allows us to be able to buy from our own and effectively encourage our own startups to be able to actually be part of the solution rather than always having to import solutions from everywhere in the world. So I do encourage the government folks who are listening here to look inwards in your countries and give a number of these startups a chance to actually prove that they can be part of the solution, because this is why we're saying the startup ecosystem is the foundation for artificial intelligence and growth in Africa, according to Minister Stella earlier on. Now we're going to move on swiftly, and we're going to be talking to Dr. Marape, who has been a pioneer for education and who is also one of the key women who has influenced me a lot in regards to how you use artificial intelligence to solve problems in education, and also how you look at the African ecosystem and create a process-based learning rather than outcome-based learning that allows us to create artificial intelligence models or artificial intelligence solutions that even help us train our own education system. So I'm going to pass it over to Dr. Marape. Please do welcome her from the UNESCO headquarters. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kamara, and thanks for having me. And I thank the first two previous speakers. And let me build on what Dr. Tsado kept saying, that the future is now. Africa cannot wait. But at the same time, we have to take learners from where they are. My focus is on the future of AI in education in Africa, with a focus on young working population. And in order for us to talk about the future, we have to first acknowledge, as the Honorable Minister also noted when she was talking about our feeble investment in infrastructure and AI, we have to acknowledge where we are. If we say the future is now, where are we in education in Africa today? And let me acknowledge that a lot of progress has been registered, especially since the Education for All movement, but we are not sitting at a comfortable launching pad, and there we have to accept. Africa has the youngest, one of the youngest populations in the world. When you look at people who are between 15 to 24 years, constituting about 16% of the population, but importantly, that by 2025, projections are that the 15 to 24-year-olds will increase from the 226 million they were in 2015, they will double, or a little bit more than double. The second part is, if you look at our 0 to 15 years old, they account for a little over 40%. So Africa is young, but the moral of the story is that, the short of it, is that Africa's population has to be either in learning institutions or just entering the labor market. This is where the bulk of Africa lies. This is where the future of Africa is. The future of Africa is right where its children are, and anything else like AI and ourselves can only be wise by investing well in the future, which is the youth. It's a remarkable energy if we invest wisely on them. Now, while Africa, the best part of Africa ought to be in learning institutions, Sub-Saharan Africa in particular has very limited access to education opportunities. Just to quickly say, almost 60% of young people of 15 to 17 years of age are not in any form of education, institution, or process. And access to higher education is about 9%. This is very low compared to other regions. If you look lower to 6 to 11-year-olds who are out of school, it's almost 1/5 of the children. This is not a good starting point from education. The quality of education is a challenge, and it manifests itself in the high proportion of both primary and secondary school teachers who are less qualified compared to their counterparts. And there are reasons for this we cannot go in depth with. The Honorable Minister mentioned some of the legacies of apartheid. The apartheid legacy is in the recent history, but Africa has struggled with establishing good quality education for long. We have acute shortages of teachers in Africa, about 17 million. We will need 17 million new teachers by 2030 if we are to make any progress towards where the world is. And we have rampant shortage of other traditional resources. This impact on the quality is expressed in the learning outcomes. Globally, yes, we have the global learning crisis, where nearly 2/3 of 600 million school-age children are not acquiring basic competencies. But for Africa, sub-Saharan Africa, it accounts for 32.7, almost 33% of these kids who are not making the basic minimum competencies of just basic reading and numeracy before we get into digital literacy and all those things that we should be on. So that's the picture in education. Now, looking at the participation of African youth in the labor market, at a quick glance, it looks as if sub-Saharan Africa is not doing too far compared to world average, because the 2019 youth labor force participation rate in sub-Saharan Africa is about 48%. And this is that is not too far from the world average, which is about 53%. However, if you go below the surface, these young people are in poor quality work. So they are doing poor quality work under poor environment with very little remuneration, especially for African young women. So there's a gender dimension there. Employment is predominantly in the informal sector, in the informal economy, and the employment itself is informal. Consequently, even though it looks like we have a 48% participation, excuse me, about 13% of these employed young Africans live in extreme poverty. They are called workers who are, they are in working poverty. And then an additional 17% is in moderate poverty. So we actually have African young people, which means they are in the lower ranks of the skills. And we know projections are all that the higher risk of losing job and work are those people who are in the lower ranks of the skills, semi-skills to the middle-level skills, particularly middle-level skills, because their tasks can be quickly automated. So now, if we have this challenge, the Honorable Minister spoke of policies. It means, as she spoke about AI policies, they have to be integrated with economic growth policies to create jobs for higher level skills. But because higher level skills create jobs for middle and lower level skills, it has to be integrated with education policies that emphasizes quality, relevance, resource efficiency, and equity. So what is it that AI can do to take us towards a more desirable future? I'm going to be very fast before Kamara tells me. So if I speak very fast, please excuse me. I think AI can enable us to open the global virtual classrooms. This is happening in higher education through MOOCs. There shouldn't be any reason why it cannot happen in lower levels of education, and in order to open access, and this is desperately needed. But as the Honorable Minister mentioned, COVID-19 gave us a good wake-up call, a rude awakening. Africa has a compounded challenge of reducing access because of language barriers. It's the one continent where learners of all ages are taught and they engage in their learning experience through foreign languages. And so they have the double hurdle of dealing with the language and then with the concepts that they are being taught. And with the AI can break some of these areas, perhaps with simple things like plug-in translators that can help learners to learn in their languages slowly and slowly. We have too many of them, but we can standardize orthographies across groups of languages if we are serious about alleviating the burden, and AI could play a huge role. AI can also help to make our access to education more inclusive by opening to the otherly abled persons, like the visually impaired through audio facilities, for the physically impaired, because we can then take education to them rather than ask them to come to it. And also for those with auditory impairments, because then we can provide subtext. And so the first challenge that Africa has is access, and AI has multiple roles. The second challenge is moving curricula towards relevance. A lot of curricula in African countries look like curricula from any other place. They are very generic, they are devoid of context, and they are not well-grounded. And AI can help us translate curricula into lifelong learning systems themselves before we can count on them to support lifelong learners. But to do so means to create curricula that are flexible enough, that are futuristic enough. Now, if we talk about futuristic enough, we can tap on AI to collect data, the oxygen of our days, the minister calls it, and to support us with big data analytics to serve as observatories for trends in future competencies that are needed in life and at work, but also to enable us to update curricula real time rather than be implementing obsolete curricula. And AI can do that, which is very difficult to do now as we use paper and pen type of curricular document. We need to mainstream AI and other technologies, emerging technologies, into our curricula, not just as learning.
Hello.
Yes?
Yes, Dr. Marafe, so I'll just give you 2 minutes to wrap up so that we can get onto the panel discussion.
I actually put my timer on, so I put myself on 15 minutes, so I'm very careful about that. Don't worry. When my timer goes, my 15 minutes will be over. So we need to mainstream not just a learning area, but as a way of educating and a way of learning, and to make curricular reforms more affordable. Now, when it comes to effective learning, AI has a lot of potential to help learners engage in self-directed learning and to enable them into self-benefiting agencies. It also has the potential to help us mainstream what are otherwise very difficult competencies beyond the traditional disciplines, like collaboration, teamwork, negotiation, interacting with the world, interacting with others, multiculturalism, we can actually not only mainstream these through AI, but we can observe the learning process and changes through AI as they happen and allow for the ability to monitor these so-called 21st century competencies. AI can help us differentiate learning and customize learning, and it can also help us sustain learning in and outside the classroom. Equally, AI can address shortages of teachers by pooling the few master teachers that we have so they can teach the world instead of just the kids in front of them. But as the teachers do that, the master teachers do that, with the novice teachers in class, we kill two birds with one stone because we are exposing learners to high quality learning and teaching, but we are also giving teachers on-the-job training that is very concrete and easily and readily available. And we can buy through AI, we can buy teachers time efficiency. One thing that teachers are, a resource that teachers are poor in is time. And a lot of that, the time is taken by administrative tasks that can be quickly routinized. Even lower level teaching tasks like assessing lower level skills that need to be automated, like automaticity in reading, automaticity in literacy. This can be achieved by applying AI easily. We can boost also the rigor of continuous assessment, particularly in a competence-based environment where we emphasize the developmental progression. And if we have carefully designed rubrics, AI can help us do continuous assessment instead of depending too heavily on, what do we call it, national exams that you have to wait years before you know that kids were not learning. And AI can help us close the assessment, feedback, and responsive pedagogical loop, which things are very difficult for teachers to do in the classroom. Now, quickly on youth, AI can help us provide youth updates on competence trends, as I said. They can locate the demand in the global labor market. Where are the demands for these competencies? So our youth can know that they work for the world and not for just Africa. The AI can provide a virtual marketplace to match demand to supply, and AI can provide real-time opportunities for continuous reskilling and upskilling. Now, do we have the capability in terms of AI? The honorable ministers touched on this, but I think I can leave that to discussion.
Yes, that would be, I mean, Dr. Marape, that's absolutely fantastic session. And I think a couple of the things that we've gotten out of that is, you know, how AI can allow us to create customized education, and also how we can use artificial intelligence as well to be able to create a decentralized federated learning process, which obviously means that we can get the best of the best to teach everybody while everybody else learns within that same ecosystem, layering artificial intelligence on top of it to allow us now provide a systematic process of learning that develops the minds of the young people in Africa. We really, really appreciate you, Dr. Marope, for the insight you've given us, and also how you and the UNESCO organization are thinking about AI as a future for Africa. Now we're going to go into the panel discussion, which is quite an exciting panel of experts that we have lined up for this session. So for those of you who are just coming on board, I'll introduce myself very quickly and introduce the rest of the panel. My name is John Kamara. I'm the director for the Machine Intelligence Institute of Africa in Cape Town. I'm also the founder of Afia Record here in Nairobi, which is an AI-driven health tech platform where we are, as we're saying, solving health tech issues, COVID-19 issues, using our AI as part of the solution within this ecosystem. And we'll be talking a bit more about that. I'd like to then introduce the rest of the panelists. Alex Sedov, who you met earlier on, we'll give them 1 minute each to introduce themselves. Alex, would you introduce yourself for a minute?
All right, I was just setting this back up. Yes, I think you've already heard a lot of me a moment ago, but yes, Alexander Sedov, so co-founder and board chair of Alliance for AI, and you must be quite familiar with us now as we are really set up to help accelerate anyone who's interested in a fourth industrial revolution. We help accelerate them from the point where they have almost no knowledge of what's going on with programs that go all the way up to being an elite global player, because that's what we think is really can really differentiate folks from Africa. Thank you, John.
Thank you. We're also going to bring in one of my really favorite people lately that I've been talking to a lot, Selena Lee, who is creating a huge community for artificial intelligence and data science in Africa. Selena.
Hi. It's great to be here. My name is Selena Lee. I'm dialing in from Cape Town, South Africa. And I'm the CEO of Zindi. Zindi is a data science competition platform focused on the African market. We host a community of 15,000 data scientists across Africa, solving some of the world's most pressing business and social challenges using AI and data science.
Thank you, Selena. Next panelist is somebody I've gotten to know quite well the past few days. We've had a few chats, late night in California and early mornings here. Brian Talebi. Brian, please introduce yourself.
Hey, how's everybody doing? It's fantastic to be here. Thank you for having me. I'm the CEO of Ahura AI. We invent a technology that enables people to learn 3 to 5 times faster than traditional education by using artificial intelligence and by collecting over 10,000 data points every second. So in addition to selling our technology to corporations here in the United States and around the world, for every license that we sell, we give away a free license to members of underserved communities globally, especially with a gender lens, and we have a heavy focus on Africa.
Thank you. And finally, we want to introduce Toyosi Akarele Ogunjusi, who is joining us from Nigeria. We're waiting for her to join us, but we will start the panel because of time, and when she joins us, we'll continue. So this panel, as you can see, we've chosen quite an interesting panel because one of the key topics for this year is education, learning, and accessibility for AI. And obviously, this is AI for good, and there's a lot of social AI solutions and discussions that we would. So I want to start with Selena. Selena, one of the things I want to talk to you about, ask you, is about social good in AI, and how is that what we call a commercially viable operation that allows you to scale businesses, but at the same time provide the social infrastructures that we need to help the continent with building the community of data science and AI experts.
Sure. So when we created Zindi with the recognition that there were organizations and companies across Africa that were generating more and more data. And so we were living in a world of data abundance, but at the same time, organizations didn't necessarily have the skills to extract the full value of that data through technologies like AI and machine learning. And at the same time, we realized that there was this growing community, this pool of young talent, up and coming data science talent in Africa that was really going under the radar in terms of these organizations knowing about them. So I think in terms of social impact, just putting the pieces of the puzzle together, just creating a space where the organizations and companies that need these data science solutions and talent, and at the same time, creating a space for African data scientists to showcase what they're capable of, to continue to hone their skills on real life problems and real life data sets. It's kind of a win-win. So, we're adding business value, but at the same time, we're also creating, new opportunities for African data scientists in terms of employability and upskilling through real life problem solving.
Thank you, Selena. I'm going to jump to you, Alex. What has been the challenges that you've seen in how we try to integrate artificial intelligence and things like basic machine learning into various ecosystems in Africa, What are the challenges around education, and what are the touch points you think government should be active about?
The biggest challenge is really, well, education is the biggest challenge in terms of bringing any new technology into any ecosystem, because that's the entry point. People need to know about technology and mass. Today, it's really with the traditional education system as I come to understand it. Hopefully, Dr. Marupe might be able to comment on this as well. It's not built to change rapidly as technology is changing. And so it needs some support. Either it needs to be redesigned, or there needs to be an opening for new kinds of platforms to exist on top of the traditional platform. For example, you have many AI communities across the entire continent of Africa that are coming up with programs and initiatives to teach people about this new technology, right? And AI is not the last one. In the next few years, there will be something new. It continues to change. And so we need to set up the platforms to recognize these new systems that come on top of the traditional systems to support them. Some examples are Data Science Nigeria platform and AI Kenya. If I sat here, I would list about 80 of them that exist on the continent. Our organization, Alliance for AI, as I mentioned before, got created this distributed crowd healing program in the form of AI clubs that will want to distribute not just to schools, but even religious centers like churches and mosques and other parts that will help people to learn. But we then call on the government to figure out a way to help recognize people who come with capabilities and not just folks who have degrees. I'm sure Brian will talk about this as well later on with his AI, incredible AI platform. It is truly cutting edge as the top companies in the world are leveraging what Brian is building. I'll pause.
Thank you. Brian, I'm gonna ask you a different spin of a question that we're getting from the audience. One of the, they're asking, you sit in the US, and obviously you were doing amazing stuff with it. How easy is it for a company here in Africa to be able to apply machine learning? One, because of the lack of education, and two, because of the cost of artificial intelligence. And how do they actually find this funding? And a lot of our audience want to know from you, what is your take on this, and how do they proactively go around this situation?
Sure, that's a fantastic question. And Alex, thank you very much for the kind words as well. So one of the interesting things about artificial intelligence right now is that most of the algorithms that most AI companies use have been around for 30, 40 years. The biggest differentiator for artificial intelligence companies now, whether they're here in the United States or in Africa, is the quantity and the quality of the data that you collect. Now, the cost of running artificial intelligence in your company for all of the people that are watching has plummeted because there are a lot of off-the-shelf tools that you can buy from these large organizations that enable you to implement artificial intelligence into your existing platforms or into the companies that you have. The key is, what is the data that you're collecting? How do you model your, build those models in a way that the data is structured and clean and provides value ultimately for the solution that you're trying to generate?
Thank you. Selena, I'm going to go back to you again from a question from our audience. How do you think, what are the chances of survival for startups in the African ecosystem in the AI space? And we really want you to be honest here because people really want to know. You are right in the center of it.
Sure. I mean, speaking from the point of view of a startup working in the AI space in Africa, I think, let's see, I mean, I feel optimistic. And part of the reason why I feel optimistic is because, like I said, we've reached 15,000 users on Zindi in about a year and a half. And every week we have hundreds of new data scientists that are joining the platform. And so the reason why I feel optimistic is because I feel like there's this movement that's happening in Africa, across Africa, from South Africa to Zimbabwe to Ghana to Tunisia. There's a movement that's happening. And so I think that while there's still a lot of challenges for startups in Africa, any startup in Africa, there's challenges in terms of raising enough capital and the market opportunities. But at the same time, if there's a space for a startup to succeed, I think that AI, being on the cutting edge, is well positioned. And on top of it, you have this driving force, which is the youth in Africa, which are upskilling quickly in this space, and that will drive the innovations in this space.
Okay, so Alex, I mean,
if you allow me to add to that a little bit, the piece I also see is the information arbitrage, right? Startups around the entire world, it's hard for them to survive. But then across the world, many programs have been put together to provide support and guidance for these startups, provide free cloud credits, provide technical support, provide marketing support. These programs exist around the world, but those programs are somehow not aware that African startups are doing AI. And so they're not advertising to Africa. And so there needs to be someone connecting that. At Alliance for AI, we do the best we can. We make posts on Twitter every time we find out, because we are in San Francisco and we're connected to all of this. So we see it and we know the opportunities. But perhaps there's someone larger than us that can play this role as well and help plug this gap, because you have the accelerators from Amazon, from NVIDIA, from Google, from Alibaba. They're helping tens of thousands of startups across the world, but their portfolio of African startups is very slim.
Okay, so if we take the conversation from then, Brian, do you think that there is a need for collaborative partnership within the startup ecosystem in Africa first? And then do you think that AI itself is too much of a mystical value that most startups don't really need? And how do you think Africa can leverage the opportunity that is being presented at the minute?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. Look, collaboration is the key to success for any tech company. Part of the reason that San Francisco has done so well over the years and become the preeminent tech hub in the world is because of the level of collaboration where people don't see each other as necessarily competitors. They see each other as people that they're going to collaborate with over the next 10, 20, 30, 40 years, not, hey, this is just one transaction or I have to beat this person at this other thing. It's all about how do we bring our talents together? How do we enable multiple companies to all be successful? And so I love what the folk you guys are doing as far as bringing technology companies in Africa together to collaborate to enable them to be successful. And it's critical that they collaborate with the United States as well. What was the second part of the question that you asked?
We were talking about in terms of demystifying AI. Is it necessary and important that every company in Africa actually has to be AI driven?
Absolutely. I would say it's necessary for every company around the world to be AI driven at this point. Look, artificial intelligence right now is where the internet was back in the 90s, where corporations were just beginning to realize that they need to have a website, they need to have an internet presence. And the ones that did were able to perform radically better than companies that did not, to the point where a short period later, if you didn't have a website, you essentially didn't exist as a company. Artificial intelligence is the same thing. It's not some super complex idea. It's something that will impact every single industry, every single company around the world. And the folks that ignore it are going to go the same way as Blockbuster and other companies. So it's really critical that every company has an AI strategy, an AI plan, and understands how to leverage data and artificial intelligence to ultimately provide more value for their consumers and for their environments.
So we're saying Y2K might happen to the companies who don't necessarily embrace AI. For those of you who are young enough. Selena, one last question before we go back to the audience again. Where do you see the role of the government in the push for artificial intelligence in Africa, and specifically on health? How do you think AI can help us achieve some of the milestones we need to achieve during this COVID period? A lot of people want to know that.
Sure. I mean, I think on the side of health, I recently had a really interesting conversation where with someone about the role of AI in Africa in healthcare, and I think that it's really about extending the limited resources that there are for healthcare, extending the reach, increasing the efficiency of getting services out to more remote, less accessible spaces, less accessible people. And so AI is maybe not even necessarily going to be as revolutionary as a robot doctor, but it can be as simple as diagnostics becoming more accessible and efficient, maybe mobile-based diagnostics, so that extension health workers can escalate cases as they need to be. So I think that AI will play a critical role in healthcare in Africa, for sure. And in terms of the role of government, I'm not exactly, I think Alex probably has more experience in terms of the role of government in AI, but I think that we're seeing some barriers or potential barriers versus benefits in terms of data security and data privacy policies, especially for Zindi, we work so across different markets. In South Africa, you have poppy. In other countries, you have more stringent or less stringent data, policies. And so I think that, that's something that the governments will be looking at more carefully, and that can either hinder or accelerate the use of AI in the market.
Toyosi just joined us. Alex, I'm going to go to her real quick. Toyosi, can you hear me?
Hi, John. I can hear you. How are you doing today?
Good. One very important question, and it's quite a simple question from our audience, is: do you think that governments actually understand artificial intelligence? One, and do you think they use it as a buzzword? Two, and do you think actually we need to train governments in Africa to actually understand what artificial intelligence is? So, Toyosi, over to you.
Thanks very much, John. I think my answer to that question will be very direct, and I'll speak from the Nigerian perspective. In the last couple of months, our Honorable Minister for Communications and the Nigerian IT Development Agency have been working around, powering artificial intelligence and doing some work at the intersection of the public and the private sectors to ensure that we use, AI to drive collaborative effort around solving problems, specifically in the area of information dissemination, education, policy making, and things like that. But one of the things that is very crucial for us to pay attention to is that as of today, African governments don't quite understand the multi-layered challenges that the continent does have, and the power that technology, we haven't quite mapped out what our technology priorities should be as individual nations and as a continent. So for example, yesterday, you may have seen it in the news that the Association of the Staff Union of Universities of Nigeria said that e-learning is impossible in the country. And that is the academic union of universities which is like the union of our university lecturers. In a world where we've been on partial and full lockdowns for the last couple of months, you would have thought that people should be seeking and trying to figure out what the potential solutions would be as to how we can enhance learning and advance the education of our children. But you have the lecturers themselves saying that e-learning is unable to work. And when you then think about the policy frameworks for
I think we lost Toyosi. Obviously, the universities are not working in Nigeria, so the internet is down.
The question is, where are we with basic technology in our education policy making? All of the innovation that's happening. Say it again. Can you hear me?
No, go ahead. We're listening to you.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. So I was saying, basic technology forms the very first level foundation upon which you can now begin to build more advanced technologies like artificial intelligence, data science, and other computational technologies. And you'd find that, I'd say that our governments do not understand the full scope of the power that technology does wield over our development as a continent. And I mean, to your question about whether we need to train governments, the first thing that we need to do is to perhaps begin a reorientation process on the mindsets of the people on the government side. Because all of the innovation that's currently happening within countries, I mean, I'll take Nigeria, my country, for example, you'd see that the systems that are powering technology, innovation, and growth, all of that innovation are coming from the side of the private sector. And all of this technology are even concentrated in certain cities around the country. It's not even permeated all of the different states of the country yet. So do we need to train government? Before we even begin to train the government, it's even important for you to let for you to remove the politics that has held us down as a country and as a continent in such a way that our government officials don't resist technology because they think it will take their jobs away.
Absolutely.
For example, for us at Rise Networks, we're the first learning, research, and work readiness lab in the country. And one of the greatest challenges we face, even in speaking to companies about training their staff, speaking to governments about reskilling and upskilling people, public servants on the government side, is that a lot of people are afraid that they hear artificial intelligence will take away their jobs, and so they're resisting it with all their power and their might. But what we're telling them is artificial intelligence is simply non-biological intelligence. It's even going to create more jobs. It will make our systems more efficient. And whether the government
I'm gonna have to go to the next question.
There's really not much that the government of Africa can do about it.
We agree with you. Because of time, I'm going to ask one last question to you, Alex, and you'll be very quick about it. 2 minutes. Yeah. Do you think that African investors understand artificial intelligence in terms of investing in our local startups here? And do you think the likes of the ITU, the UN funding organizations can do a bit more in terms of investing in AI-driven companies? This is a question by a lot of the people in the audience. So make it quick and fast.
Yes, quick and fast is 100%. 100%. There should be more funding coming into this. That was the entire, if I was to confess, the entire reason for this entire session was to create that awareness that there's AI happening in Africa, and foundations and capable bodies should start to look into it and invest in it, because this innovation coming out of Africa is very important and crucial and important to meet the United States development goals by 2030. These innovations are accessible, affordable, and reusable across the entire world. Better, if you allow me to say, than innovations coming from San Francisco, which tend to be a lot more expensive as they don't have the necessary context. And so then just with 30 seconds to the government piece. Governments around, I've had the privilege or honor to interact with governments across the entire world when you talk about deploying supercomputers to them. And I can say governments across the world don't understand AI, not just in Africa, but the way they fixed it was to create avenues for the private sector to influence the government and inform them. And with Africa, we must tap into the diaspora. You have Africans at the top of the top companies. They know what it is. There has to be
we must tap into the diaspora.
Yes.
On that note, I'm going to have give my closing remark before we hand back. It's been an absolutely enjoyable session. Thank you, Selena. Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Alex, Minister, Dr. Marape. Also, everybody who has been part of this panel. My path in short to you is very simple. I believe that Africa is a continent with numerous amounts of talents. The talent, we don't have shortage of talent, but we have shortage of decision makers and leaders who will allow us to enter that fourth industrial revolution so that it doesn't become a buzzword that we consistently throw around. And it's also important that we have the right people who actually govern these institutions and who govern the process of the next level of information that we use to generate value in our continent. Where we are right at the cusp of history. And if you look at history across multiple generations, there's always a time in life when there is a shift and a dynamic shift in change. COVID-19, climatic conditions, all these things are part of those signs that are telling us there is going to be a new economic power. And there is no reason why Africa cannot be that economic power. So our governments, our private sector, our VCs, our investors have to rethink how they invest, how they provide solutions, how they provide opportunities, and also how they look inwards to allow our own startup, our own private companies. And most importantly, we must trust ourselves enough to make mistakes that allow us to learn very quickly and become the proponents of our own history. There is no reason why we can't have AI companies from Africa building AI solutions that can sell in America. There's no reason why we can't do the same in Europe and anywhere else. And the diaspora that we have becomes a massive opportunity for us to leapfrog this technology and use it to drive the value of our young generation, where we own the youth infrastructure in the world. So I'm really excited to be part of this change. I think there's a lot of things happening. I think governments should look inward during this COVID period. It presents them an opportunity to look at all the startups in your country that are actually doing amazing things. Focus on those startups, try to help them, invest in them, take a chance, because the UN, ITU can only provide these sort of opportunities, but we need to embrace it ourselves. Thank you very much. My name is John Kamara from Mafia Record, Alex Ado, Brian Talabi, Selena, and the ITU. Kesna, back to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, John, and especially for the amazing time management. It was great. And big thanks to our distinguished speakers and the audience for such an interactive discussion. We would like to also thank our partners and sponsors for their continuous support. Next week, we have 3 AI for Good sessions. The AI for Gender Inequality Breakthrough track to be held on 23rd June. The launch of the Global Dialogue on Esports to be held on Wednesday, 24th June. And the AI for Good Innovation Factory live pitching session to be held on Friday, 26th June. For more information, please visit our website, aiforgood.itu.int, or follow us on social media. We will also post all the information in our chat. So thank you very much and see you next week.